Hey guys, I'm Tom. I have been salvaging and converting my old school 40k World Eaters Chaos Space Marine army into a late Horus Heresy Legion force of World Eaters. I've done some updates on individual units, but I'm much further along than that. And I think it's about time to take stock of the project as a whole and get an overview of it, both of what has been done, future plans, and any changes I want to make, as well as other interesting bits and bobs. During this video, I will briefly go over the concept if any of you are new, and if that part piques your interests. There are a few videos in this series already, and they will be linked in a playlist in the description or the cards. So a quick recap of the concept and process. First of all, I take my old 40k model and I strip it of paint. I do this because the colors aren't compatible to paint over and do it in a nice way, unfortunately, so paint stripping it is. Then once it's stripped, I mostly disassemble into the component parts, and then I use the appropriate parts for the setting. So that is most of the bodies, most of the backpacks, some of the weapons. I try and steer away from the chaosy bits, such as horns, mutations, excessive trims, iconography. Try to steer away from using 40k era weaponry, but I am so short on pistols that I unfortunately have to use the 40k bolt pistols. Then I assemble it anew from the ground up while mixing in quite a few Heresy era bits that were left over from my Imperial Fists project. I have different torsos, backpacks, helmets or shoulder plates, or weaponry that all help turn back the time for these models towards the 30k era. Sometimes you can be lucky because the focal points are on the upper half of the body, so it can be as simple as the appropriate helmet, a single shoulder pad, and then a plain chaosy one on the other side, and then an appropriate backpack. That could still be a 40k backpack as long as you choose it wisely. And then lastly, paint it in Heresy era colors. That helps mask the last little bit of it. There are some considerations of what is Heresy era legit and not, but I won't go into too much detail in this video about that. I can do a shorter form kinda lore video-ish about identifying the different armor marks, maybe some weapon variants, and then take a look at what the 40k range offers that could be legit for use in 30k. And that is basically a summary of the process that I've constructed my army from. While I did recently do a video on my Red Hand destroyers for this project, I haven't done much of an update on the overall project in a while. The destroyers have actually been done for a long while. In fact, last year in May, so a full year ago more or less, I had 1440 points painted and based. I even filmed a video for it, but I never found the motivation to do much with that. So here's a bit of footage of those 1400 points. Fast forward to today, I have just shy of 2000 points painted and ready for the table. Although not all of the squads are game legal at this point in time. I've been working on stripping and kit bashing up models for the quote-unquote illegal squads to make them legal. I will go through these units and loadouts shortly. But first I want to briefly talk about the theme and the lore behind my force. It all started out as an experiment to see if I could, and at that time I wasn't working towards a specific theme. So let's try to backwards analyze what this force could be and then craft a narrative based on that. Since the force is made up of a lot of 40k chaos bits with lots of spikes, iconography and demon influence removed, of course, it is still a lot of later armor marks, and there is still a fair bit of chaosy influence, no matter how much I try to remove it. So these two things guide the lore for the force somewhat. First of all, because of the armors and weapons involved, I think it's safe to say that we are in late Heresy, and the chaosy hints on their warplates eliminates these guys being loyalists. So sadly, no early Heresy Istvan 3 loyalists, at least not the current collection. If I were to expand it with some unmodified, pure Heresy kits over time, then sure, I could use a subsection of the overall collection for some loyalist battles. Anyway, they are also both fairly ornate and made up of a mixed match set of armor marks, both on the units and on each individual model. This is a design limitation from the fact that I did not have enough pure armor sets in the first place. And so the Mark V theme became sort of a underlying theme in both of its categories. Both the mass-produced suit that is the quote-unquote production Mark V and the makeshift suits of armor with replacement parts switched over time by the Legion Tech Marines and Artificers that were also labeled Mark V as a retrospective term. All of this tells us that the Marines are sort of a veteran force, having been through many conflicts, with armors being fixed on campaigns and squads consolidated together due to attrition. Like with the mixed matched armor sets, the abundance of Anvilus pattern power packs tells us that these guys are either reckless or forced to make do with what they are supplied with. In the case of World Eaters, that could honestly be both. With the models guiding the narrative, this leads me to the following lore for my force. These guys are the survivors of several different companies, formed during the Shadow Crusade in Ultramar. In the eyes of the other traitor legions, the 12 have become increasingly unrestrained and unreliable, with both their strategic and tactical acumen fallen off a cliff. So why should the War Master waste the best of the scarce and sought after resources on them when there are more dependable legions around? I see these guys as having been given the lowest priority of the legions in terms of the logistics supply chain, with the War Master prioritizing more dependable legions such as his own, the Iron Warriors, or the Death Guard, to name a few. I could even see that some of these legions get supplied with fresh suits of, for instance, Mark IV, that they keep for themselves and then hand off their old spare parts and whatever they have lying around to the World Eaters, and so it's a second-hand supply chain for them. Let's be honest, they probably wouldn't mind anyway. With the high attrition rate and the rapid indoctrination, why bother with the best gear? So long story short, my force is a group of Shadow Crusade survivors, undersupplied, and a mixed force of several companies. The last part is mainly there to have an excuse to run special characters such as Karn. Last year, I also did a subset of my force as a kill team for a narrative campaign that we did at my local gaming club. While you might not be into kill team, I'm not really either, but bear with me. These individuals that I made inspired future expansions and motivated me to do more work on this project as a whole. So let me briefly introduce the team for you. Led by veteran Sergeant Harkon Var, 358th Tactical Line Company. Krond the Butcher, a rampager of 34th Assault Company. Saxa, Legion Despoiler Vexilla, Icon Bearer, 67th Assault Company. Korak, Support Gunner, 358th Tactical Line Company. Varus, Rampager, 67th Assault Company, Shrivetalon in Kill Team. Skaranak, the Anointed, 34th Assault Company. Skane, Tactical Marine, Vexilla, 358th Tactical Line Company. Tarkor, Heavy Support Gunner, 358th Tactical Line Company. Makar, Red Hand Destroyer, 34th Assault Company, in Kill Team Heavy Support Gunner. I wrote some introductory lore for the other participants of the campaign and to tie them in with 40k, even though they're 30k themed. If you are interested, I will read the introductory lore here. As I read out this tiny piece of lore, I will have some footage and images of the kill team's construction on in the background. If you are uninterested, then just skip to the next chapter or to this timestamp. M31. When the Emperor defeated Horus, and the Lion and Gilliman broke through to the Sol system, the forces of the traitor legions retreated from the siege of the Imperial Palace. Over the next decades, the remaining traitors continued to rampage far and wide across the galaxy before being pushed back towards the Eye of Terra. Various elements of the 67th and 34th Assault Companies, as well as the 358th Tactical Line Company of the 12th Legion World Eaters, ended up in the same flotilla on their post-siege rampage across the stars. The Fracti Securis, an Iconoclast class destroyer, part of a 3-ship destroyer squadron escorting a Grand Cruiser, never made it to the last translation of its journey in M31, headed for the Cadian Gate and into the Eye of Terra. Largely uncharted at the time, this was an even riskier translation, especially on World Eater ships, as those who are psychically attuned tended to agitate the legionaries on board, and thus the navigators had a high attrition rate. M41. With the destruction of Cadia and the opening of the rifts, warp travel is even stranger and more unreliable than ever. For half a galaxy away from their intended destination and over 100 centuries later, the Fracti Securis once again entered real space from the wound in reality on the fringes of Segmentum Tempestus that has been labeled Annihilus by Imperial scholars. On the bridge, veteran Sergeant Harkor Varar stands confused. Covered in blood and guts of half the crew in the room, slowly coming to his senses after sating the nails, he picks up the Vox serf by the throat and demands the destination to be set for the closest inhabited system. Rar and his command squad, who are no doubt mirroring his actions across the ship's compartments, are desperately in need of obeying the butcher's nails, call for a proper fight. Minutes later, the weeping serf nervously calls out that he has picked up a signal from a nearby Vox beacon with the ident marker TR-OA. The TR-OA is where the campaign took place in our local gaming club. As a fun and thematic thing, I decided to keep track of the kills for all my team members during the campaign, as I figured that would be a very World Eaters thing to do. Here is the final tally of skulls for my operatives. I have a bit more lore that I've written between battles where we follow the confused legionaries as they get to grips with what the universe looks like 10,000 years later, and their nails becoming increasingly insistent. That can wait for other videos if that has even the slightest interest. What I had here was just introductory lore to explain why 30k Marines would show up in 40k, even though that shouldn't be an issue anyway, because warp and time, especially Eye of Terror, if they've just been hiding in there, it doesn't matter. Moving on from the kill team and back to Heresy and the project as a whole, given that I've made these models, some of them would need a home to be fielded in my Heresy army, such as the Plasma Gunner and the Heavy Bolter. One option is to use them in a veteran squad, but I wanted some firepower and some flexibility for my force. We are not yet at the point in time where they are all frothing berserkers all the time. It is still the Legion as it starts, at least at the beginnings of the battle. If they decide to throw away their heavy weapons and charge at the enemy, then sure, that probably does happen a lot. But they start out like this when they're deployed. So to that end, I built a tactical support squad for Korak to call home. This unit will provide some anti-heavy infantry firepower for my force, or potentially light vehicles and dreadnoughts. I got another 2 Heresy era plasma guns in my bits box, and I plan to reinforce the squad with those at some point soonish. For Tarkor, my MVP during the Kill Team campaign, by the way, I am making a heavy support squad. So far, I have made it a minimum squad of 5 with enough bits to easily expand it to a full 10-man squad. It isn't the most competitive, but remember, this army is a salvage project with minimal new purchases. And you know what? 40 strength 5 shots every turn does have kind of a nice ring to it. I might use that in some battles, even though I haven't used my Imperial Fist squad, and that's just better. But we will see. For now, it stays at 5, I think. Skane and Saxa were from my existing tactical and despoiler squads, and Makar is from my Red Hand destroyers, but he never got fielded before the campaign ended. Skaranak is fairly 40k, and while there are some descriptions like that in the Siege of Terra books, he is still not super compatible with a Legion force. He will likely sit in the cabinet or be used as a character, veteran, or sergeant, with his arm being a lightning claw or power fist in rare cases, or as a mission objective in a narrative mission, something like that. Harkon will likely end up leading squads as a sergeant, most likely the spoiler or veteran squads. Varus and Kron are beginnings of my Rampager squad, which I have not built yet. Until then, they can be fielded as sergeants or even centurions or consuls. At the time where I needed to make the Butcher Front, I did not have a double-handed chain axe, so I actually converted it up from a new 40k Chaos Terminator chain axe and put that on a two-handed grip from another weapon I had in my collection, and some Raptor legs. I think they turned out pretty cool. It was nice that these guys could motivate me to do squads, to make them playable in my force, and thus add variety to the collection. There are actually quite a few new additions to my force, and the first of them is a squad of Red Butchers, as seen here. They are armed with twin power axes. I did briefly toy with the idea of giving them lightning claws, because I think that is a killer loadout for them, but for now glued on the axis, except for the unit leader, who has magnetized arms so he can have the double chain fists if I ever choose to do that. I think I have decided to do a bit of repainting on this squad. I think I'm going to go with red shoulders for these and any other veteran units to make them stand out in the force. I've also added a 5-man squad of autocans that was previously a Havoc squad in 40k. I plan on adding another 5 Marines to bulk out the squad. These will be the new Mark 6 upgrades, both because it is cheaper and because it contributes to the mix match of weapons and armor marks. I have expanded my despoiler squads with a few more members. I needed a bit of punch in the form of power weapons and just in general more bodies to put on the table. In fact, I need 3 more as a minimum to make 2 10-man squads of despoilers. Ideally many more, but as a start just to make it game legal and be able to use all my sergeants. They can, of course, and will most likely be combined into a 20-man despoiler squad, and hopefully over time another 20-man despoiler squad. One of the few actual new kits for this force is a squad of Tartarus Terminators that I'm working on. The initial idea was to do all lightning claws because it looks cool and loads of attacks and it's a great weapon. But I did decide to magnetize a couple of them as there were extra shoulder pads and to be able to do a command squad or just to have the option of a few special weapons, such as this Thunderhammer that I kit bashed from the old Mark III set. The armor is quite plain, but I've tried to add a few trophies, chains, spikes, or chaosy bits to tie them in with both the Legion and the rest of my force's aesthetics. My latest project has been to add a 10-man assault squad to the force. I've recently painted 3 of these as sort of test models to test the concept, and I was very happy with the outcome. The base of these are the 40k Raptors / Warp Talons kit. I shaved off all of the teeth on the jump packs as well as some lightning and horns on the legs. I've also chosen the more normal looking feet instead of the clawed ones, and also removed some of the chaos iconography on the chests and belts. And with my usual mixing in of heresy helmets and shoulder pads, I think it turned out quite well. So here is my squad, all armed with chain axes, 2 power swords, and a de-chaosified power fist for the sergeant. I have 10 more Raptors that my friend gave me, so at some point I'm going to expand or create a new squad of Assault Marines to accompany this one in a deep strike with a chaplain or champion. If only I had enough chain axes to arm everything with it. Sadly not. I've also got Karn assembled. I also have an older version of him, might use him for a Rhino Conversion at some point. But anyway, I've got the new Karn assembled. But I still need a solution for his weapon options, probably a 1mm magnet or a sturdier pin, as his weapon loadout depends on if Angron is fielded or not. Otherwise I would run Gorechild 10 out of 10 times. Speaking of Angron, I of course added him too. I think I will be painting him up for a video, but he won't be the only Primarch in that video. My friend told me that we should make a video of both of us painting our newest Primarchs together. I have no idea what format that video would take or when it will happen, but it should be a lot of fun, for us at least. Hopefully for you guys too. So that is an update on the current state of the project, but there is so much more that I could say. There are some things I would like to go back and tinker with, such as removing some plasma pistols, as I would rather have power weapons in those slots, so that might happen in the future. I'm also considering adding another 5 Ravagers to my Red Hand Destroyers with some chain axes and a Thunderhammer in there for a bit more close combat punch to the unit and to have options. Overall, a lot has happened and I look forward to getting many of these new additions painted up. I got close to just over 2,500 points with all of this, 3,000 points if you count Angron, which I hesitate to do as events rarely allow Primarchs. The force isn't very competitive, not that it should be at all, but I want to be able to deal with several types of threats and not just lose all my games by default. So my goal over the summer will be to add a few units and models like these Contemptors that I will modify, repose and kitbash, and have some stronger anti-vehicle shooting to make it more viable to bring to events and have fun at those events. I believe I'm going to one in September-ish, it hasn't been announced yet. But I aim to have a 3,000 point list ready for that event and have some fun rolling dice with this salvaged kitbashed goodness. As for other future plans for the force, I'm nearly through the last of the viable conversion candidates from my 40k force. I can see myself making a unit of Outriders from these 40k bikers. In fact, I got quite a few more 40k bikes around. But this isn't my priority at the moment, so we will see when that happens. At some point, I am at the very least going to be repainting the models that aren't viable for conversion. Maybe I will use them for custom units or campaigns. Time will tell. I also have a bunch of vehicles, but like most things in this force, they are 40k. While the Mars pattern of Rhino/Predator is legal in Heresy, I do feel like I want it to blend in a bit more. I have taken a brief look at my pile of Predators, but I haven't found the right idea yet. I think it's the sponsons that give me pause. I did heresyfy a Rhino and I really liked how it turned out. The modifications are incredibly simple. I had a spare 30k Rhino front plate from my Scorpius kit, so I swapped that with the 40k one and I added some heresy guns on top and a heresy dozer blade, and I think that did the trick very nicely. Of course, the 30k paint job helps as well. The problem for any further conversions like this is the lack of heresy front plates for the Predators, as well as I have run out of 30k top hatches at this point in time. I also definitely need some assault transports. There will certainly be many more videos in this series for the World Eaters, as I have alluded to already. I certainly also really want to add some character conversions for the Force. Both Kargos and Delvarus come to mind. I especially want to make a Triari themed command squad for Delvarus. That is going to be an awesome project, I hope. But at some point, I'm going to be more or less done with the bulk of this project. I will of course add new units, but I might move on to 40k to 30k some other armies as well, such as my Imperial Fists collection that I don't see me using for 40k ever again, or my Imperial Guard collection. I have plans to make the Imperial Guard into an allied, dual-use Imperial Army allied force that will fit with both my Imperial Fists and my World Eaters. How? Well, the short answer is that it will be a mixed-match ramshackle force for both armies. I have a narrative in mind and some ideas on how to execute it, but it will have to wait for a good long while, unfortunately. Too many projects, too little time. So that was quite a bit of an update on the state of the project. While I close out this video, there are some shots of the current state of things. And if you're still here, I thank you for watching and I hope to see you in another video in the future. Cheers.